Hey everyone, it's been a little while, but I want to come back at you with my Spyderco paramilitary, Para 3. Now, in the video right before this one, I posted, the same knife, but with I believe it came with the gray G10 scales. This is the Para 3 in the Maxamet, and they come with the gray scales. But what I did is I purchased the Flytanium titanium scales for this knife, and I just wanted to give you guys a second look with how this knife looks and how it feels and how it functions with these titanium scales. So as you can see, you could watch my previous video for more information on the knife as it comes from the factory. But now that I put on these Flytanium scales, it's I just want to talk a little bit more about this knife and how these titanium scales kind of change not only the look of the knife, but the feel and how it functions, how it carries. Okay. So as you notice, Maxamet is a tool steel, so it will patina. As you can see, I've already used this for, now it's been a few weeks now. I've used it to, cut cardboard. I've even used it to prep food, and that's why you'll see this patina. And just from basically touching, the knife, the oils, will just continue to patina over time. So I just want to give you guys kind of a look on how this knife just kind of wears in. This is still as sharp as it came from the factory. It still catches my nail for sure. And this is definitely the most sharpest Spyderco edge I've ever experienced. And it's held the edge amazingly well. I honestly can't tell any difference after I've cut all these boxes, and I've just cut zip ties. I've cut all sorts of stuff with it, and it hasn't affected the edge at all. Now, I do want to say that I did, like all Spyderco knives, they are very fun to play with. So while I've been flicking it and all that, I did drop this knife twice on the blade, and it did kind of I don't think it chipped the edge, but it kind of rolled it a little bit. But honestly, I just took my Spyderco sharp maker, the regular set, and I just kind of just sharpened it up. And honestly, even though this thing has a Rockwell that's like 68 or 69, it honestly sharpens like pretty easily. Like I honestly thought it was gonna be like incredibly like challenging to sharpen, just because I've heard how hard the steel runs and how long it holds the edge. But man, this thing honestly, it sharpens pretty good. Like I didn't have a hard time at all. So I don't know if that's your experience with Maxamet, but my experience with this steel so far has been amazing. I absolutely love this steel, and I'm definitely gonna get some more knives that run this Maximum steel for sure. And I absolutely love how it patinas. It just gives it character for sure, and it just shows you that this is your knife. This is your knife that you use, that is with you, that you carry. And so I love knives that show character. Now, like I mentioned, I do want to talk more about how these Flytanium scales have really enhanced and improved my experience with this knife. So just going back, when the first time I actually got this knife, this model, was when they first came out about 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. They came out with the S30V and the black G10. I think that's just like the standard model. And I got it because I absolutely love the Para Military 2, and actually have one. I don't have it right now, but I do have one in my collection that I use as a daily. And I love how it functions. I love how it carries. So when when Spyderco announced, the Para 3, I was like, oh man, I'm jumping on that boat for sure. So I got it, and I liked it, but Like in the previous video, I said it just didn't really speak to me. I don't know if it was just because, I just didn't, I didn't really like the particular configuration of the black G10 and the S30V, though I love Spyderco's S30V. They just do it perfectly. But I don't know, it functioned really well, but just didn't really speak to me. And us knife nuts, it's not just about function, right? Well, like it has to appeal to us aesthetically. It just has to speak to us in a certain way, and that pair of three just didn't really speak to me. So I ended up, I think, trading it or selling it. So come this version, so I know there's been many variations of the pair 3 in the last 2-3 years. But when I saw the Maxamet version in the gray G10, it spoke to me. So I already knew how the knife carried, I knew how it functioned, and those are all fantastic. But this particular variation just really spoke to me. So I was like, I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger, and I got it. But, one thing that, the thing I have about small knives is they generally tend to be, on the lighter side, right? Just by the dimensions of having a small knife means it's gonna generally be lighter. But what I love, what I like in my small knives is that I like to have some weight to it, so I like to make up the smallness by just having a little bit more heft, and that's why I got the titanium scale. So I think it went from 3 something ounces to now 4.3 ounces with these new titanium scales. And they are not they're only milled to accept the frame, or that steel, that liner. And as you can see, the liners itself has been milled out by Spyderco. I don't know if you can see. I think only on the what do you call it? This side, you could kind of see in there that it is milled, but it does give a really nice heft to the knife. It's not overly heavy, but it definitely, you could feel the difference in weight once I installed these titanium scales. Also, I do want to say that taking apart this knife was a huge headache. As you all know, if you've ever taken apart a paramilitary 2 or a pair 3, one of the biggest issues is this part right here, this lanyard, what do you call it? I don't know, this lanyard thing. It kind of flares out. So when it's not like a straight like channel. It's not like a straight like pin. It kind of flares out at the ends. So it really kind of keeps it locked in. So when you try to take it apart, it is super hard to take apart. I think there's a company out there that sells a tool that's designed to kind of help you take this part apart a little bit easier. I forgot the name of the company that sells that tool. I think it's like not even that expensive. It's like maybe 10 or 20 bucks. But if you could find that company that sells that tool, I highly recommend it. I didn't have that, so it took me like 2-3 hours, and it was so frustrating. And oh man, if you're not willing to commit to like the headache of it and the time it's gonna take to take it apart, then I don't recommend you taking the knife apart. But once it comes apart, everything else is super easy. The internal mechanisms of this knife is really easy. It's very similar to the paramilitary 2s. They have like that, what is that, bearing pivot system, and it runs on phosphor bronze washers. But yeah, man, I would say like it was quite a challenge to take it apart and install these scales. Not only that, Flytanium, I believe they like precision mill these scales. So if for some reason Spyderco's that steel liners, they are not exactly they're not exact dimensions. It's very hard to fit into the internal, what do you call it, mill, that internal space that Flytanium created to accept these liners. So it would not accept it because I believe Flytanium they precision mill it so precisely that if it's off, if the steel liner is off by like one hair, it will not go in. So I had to actually shave off a little bit of the steel liner to actually make it fit into the Flytanium scales, and that took some work as well, and that was challenging and frustrating for sure. But once everything works out, oh my lord, this knife is the perfect everyday carry knife. I am not exaggerating when I say this. Like, once you're able to make everything work out, oh god, this knife is so good. Like, it tremendously improves the for me, it tremendously improves the way it feels in the hand. I love how Flytanium kind of stone washed these scales. So it's kind of like a heavy stone wash, but it's kind of gray. It looks very similar to ZT0562 titanium scales. So if you see, it kind of has like that gray stone wash finish. It's very similar also to this as well. So you could kind of see. I don't know if you'll be able to see that on screen, but yeah, I love this just this stone wash that Flytanium did, and they chamfer the edges. The only thing I noticed is they don't chamfer the inside, so it is rather a little sharp. It could, you could feel it, but it's, honestly, in real day use, you don't really feel it. You know what I'm saying? Like, but everything where your hand interfaces with the knife, it is chamfered, so you could kind of see how he's Flytanium kind of chamfered all the edges super well. It is a large chamfer all around, and it just feels really, really good in the hand, and like I said, it does add a little bit more weight to it, at least 1 or 2 more ounces. And I love that because it is a smaller knife. I do like to have a little bit more heft, so yeah, that's just my take on, the Flytanium scales. They make a fantastic product, and I highly recommend it. But it comes with the caveat that it is gonna take you time and work to get it installed. But it is totally worth it, in my opinion. It is very rewarding that once everything kind of comes together, it is fantastic. Another thing I do want to actually point out too is I really just scratched up my lanyard. Man, I keep forgetting what this is called. I just I'm just having a brain fart now. But yeah, this lanyard pin thing, I totally jacked it up, like I said, because I didn't have the right tools. I was using pliers to try to take it apart. I did have a rag in between the two plier heads, but it still scratched it up. And I was really frustrated, and I was like, oh my god, I just paid like $200 for this knife, and I already jacked it up. But after that, after calming down and thinking about it, I was like, you know what, but this is my knife now. These scratches, all these little dings and dents, it just, oh, there you go. Sorry. Ugh. See, these dings and dents, it just tells you a story of it being my knife, So this is mine now. And, these scratches and dents are going to tell you the story of my knife. Another thing, you just saw that I dropped my knife. It is slick, so you're not going to have that grip, that texture that you would get with Spyderco's G10 scales. So it is grip. It is slick to the touch. And if you're not paying attention, like I wasn't, you're going to drop it. And I did drop this knife now 3 times. And the first time I dropped it, it kind of fell on the edge of the blade, but it didn't really do anything. Second time I dropped it on cement, on concrete, and it did roll the edge. But like I said, I was able to fix that with the Spyderco Sharp Maker, which is a fantastic sharpening system. Let me just check. There was no movement in any direction. All right, so I did use a blue Loctite on the pivot, and it's worked fantastically well. It's buttery smooth, glassy smooth. I gotta say, when I first installed these scales, it was not this smooth. So I think it had to break in. It was rather stiff, and I thought I had over tightened the pivot. but no, I did center it. I believe you can see pretty much it's centered, or as best as I can, and no movement in any direction. And I've been flicking and playing and using this knife for a few weeks now, and it's really broken in. Like any paramilitary 2 or para 3 should break in. It's just glassy smooth. I could flick it, do the Spidey flick. I could slow roll it out. I could do this thing. But yeah, and the detent is perfect. Boom. And I don't know. I think that the titanium scales also give the sound of this knife a little bit different sound than it would have on a G10 scale. I don't know if it's just it kind of amplifies the metallic click. So I don't know if you could catch this in this camera. Yeah, it gives it a different sound, and I love it. It just sounds more metallic, sounds more crisp, and overall, I mean, I highly recommend getting, the titanium scales by Flytanium. That's a mouthful to say, but yeah, highly recommend it. But like I said, it is gonna take some work to actually get it installed, but it is totally worth it at the end. I would do it again for sure, but just make sure you have the right tools, because you'll end up with a lanyard pin that looks like this if you're not careful. And yeah, it will be frustrating, but just be patient with yourself. Take the time to do it right, and you'll have no issues. When you first install it, you might, it'll be kind of stiff. The action will be a little stiff. It might not be centered up right. So you're going to have to kind of work with it and tune it to get it to that sweet spot like I was able to get. And so, yeah, highly recommend it. If you're looking to kind of dress up your Spyderco Para 3, man, look at the Flytanium scales. I know there's other companies that make, different scales for this model because it's such a popular model. Yeah, go look at all of them. I'm thinking about getting another Para 3, and then getting, I'm thinking about the K390 because I know that's also a tool steel. And I love my tool steels. I mean, as much as I'm a fan of like all the high end like newer steels. I got this is the Giant Mouse Nimbus in the micarta. I love this knife, but this is in the M390 micro clean steel. I mean, the latest and the greatest. I love this. You got, I think this is the ZTO 562 Ti in the 20 CV steel. This is a fantastic steel that's analogous to the M390. And then of course you got the tried and true, S35VN. I love this knife. And fantastic steel. Let me see. I have some other knives here. I believe this is also in S35VN. This is the Monterey Bay knives. This is the ECZ. I don't think they make this particular model. I think they came out with like an updated model of this, but this is a fantastic knife as well. And then lastly, you got the uber blingy. This is a Damasteel rose pattern. And oh man, I gotta say, man, I did make a video about the James Brand this is called a chapter knife. It's a great knife. I highly recommend it. It feels super good in the hand. But anyways, you could look at that video. It's several videos down, but yeah, you could check that out. But yeah. So highly recommend it, guys. Go for it. I call this the Iron Wolf. It's very monochrome, very just, I mean, it's just, it's gray, but I love it. So yeah, highly recommend it. I did add the lanyard to it. I'm not a lanyard guy. I really not because I feel like a lot of times the lanyard kind of interferes. It kind of makes it feel weird in the hand, but honestly, I have small to medium sized hands, and the lanyard does not get in the way. See, as you can see, it kind of sticks out at the very end. And I love how it doesn't interfere with my grip. If my hands were a little bit larger, if you have larger hands, you might feel that lanyard hole kind of protruding, kind of go into your hand. But for me, it's perfect. It kind of stays out of the way. And because it is a smaller knife, it does have a useful function when I'm pulling it out of my pocket. you know, and it does give it some a color, you know. It does, you know, you have all a bunch of gray, you know, and then you got this really sweet brown leather. I think it works really well. So anyways, I'm gonna leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time, and go ahead and check out the Flytanium titanium scales or any other scales that you want to dress up your Para 3 with. Have a great one. Bye.